I was halfway through staining the back deck of our lake cabin when I heard the crunch of tires on gravel. I glanced up, squinting into the sun, just in time to see the same silver Lexus crawling up our private driveway. Here we go again. The door flung open and out stepped Marlene. Mid-50s, platinum bob, oversized sunglasses, and that clipboard of doom clutched tight like it gave her superpowers. President of the Lakewood Pines HOA. Self-appointed guardian of property values and neighborhood misery, Marlene didn't wave. She never did. I set my brush down and walked toward her, wiping my hands on a rag. "Marlene, what is it this time?" She didn't answer me. Instead, her eyes zeroed in on the side of the cabin where my daughter, Valencia, was unloading groceries from her car. "There," Marlene pointed like she'd just spotted a burglar. "That girl is trespassing." My jaw tightened. "That girl is my daughter and also the legal owner of this cabin." Marlene scoffed like I just told her the moon was made of cheese. "Impossible. This property is under HOA jurisdiction. No one informed the board of any ownership transfer." "That's because the HOA has no say in private property transfers," I said. "The cabin was gifted to Valencia on her 25th birthday. I filed the deed with the county clerk myself." Marlene stepped back, eyes narrowed. "I'm calling the sheriff. She's not on the approved residency list." "You do that," I said, already walking back to the cabin. "And while you're at it, ask them why you're stalking my daughter." 15 minutes later, a county deputy rolled up. Poor guy looked like he just wanted to finish his shift and hit a diner. "What seems to be the problem?" he asked, eyeing Marlene's flailing gestures like he'd seen this show before. "She's trespassing," Marlene barked. "That girl." She jabbed her finger toward Valencia, now sitting on the porch with her laptop. "She doesn't live here. This is private HOA land." The deputy looked at me. "You got proof of ownership?" I handed him a copy of the deed. Valencia's name was right there, clear as daylight. He read it over, then turned to Marlene. "Ma'am, she owns the property. There's no trespassing." Marlene's face twisted like she'd just sucked a lemon. "This is a mistake. The HOA has bylaws." "We control cabin usage." The deputy gave her a tired look. "You don't override county records. If you have a legal complaint, take it up in civil court. But right now, you're wasting my time." I thought that would be the end of it, but no HOA Karen wasn't done, not even close. A week passed without incident. Then, on Tuesday morning, Valencia opened the mailbox and found a sealed envelope bearing the Lakewood Pines Association crest, a pine tree encircled by golden laurel leaves, the kind of thing designed to look official but meant absolutely nothing in a legal sense. Inside was a notice of noncompliance. According to the letter, Valencia was in violation of Section 4B, unauthorized residency, and had 15 days to vacate the premises or face escalating enforcement measures including but not limited to property liens, community sanctions, and legal action. She handed me the paper without saying a word. Her expression gave away nothing, but I could see it in her posture, shoulders squared, jaw set. She was done being polite. I read through the letter twice. It was signed by Marlene and two other board members, Hank Dorsey, a retired insurance adjuster who once threatened to sue a neighbor for planting a tree too close to a shared fence, and Carla Mayers, who once tried to have a dock removed because it obstructed the natural Lakeview aesthetic. "This is bluffing," I said. "They're counting on intimidation. Property liens. They can't do that without a court order." Valencia nodded. "They're playing lawyer, but I've got time this week." "Let's play back." She spent the rest of the afternoon at the county office, requesting copies of every recorded document related to the HOA's jurisdiction, easements, and boundaries. Meanwhile, I visited my buddy Ray, a retired land surveyor who knew the area like the back of his hand. He pulled out a map from 15 years ago, yellowed and folded at the edges, and traced the border of Lakewood Pines with a pencil. "This here," he said, tapping a line just west of our cabin, "is the outer limit of the HOA's authority. Your land's outside it. Always has been." I took a photo of the map and had Ray sign a statement verifying its authenticity. Back home, Valencia had already gathered copies of the original Articles of Incorporation for the HOA, and they were crystal clear. Lakewood Pines had been formed to oversee a cluster of cabins on the south side of the lake. Ours sat on the North Ridge, a full quarter-mile from the HOA's boundary. That night, we printed everything: surveys, deed history, municipal zoning maps, even a signed affidavit from the original developer stating that the northern lots were never intended to be part of any HOA. We compiled it all into a thick binder labeled Unlawful Enforcement Attempt. 3 days later, Valencia hand-delivered the binder to Marlene's doorstep. "You're making a mistake," Marlene said, barely cracking the door. "No, you did," Valencia replied. "This is your chance to walk it back." The door shut in her face. By Friday, things escalated. We came home from the grocery store to find an orange sticker plastered across our cabin's front window. Notice of immediate violation, unauthorized occupancy. Subject to removal. It was signed with an official-looking stamp that read Lakewood Pines Enforcement Committee. That's when Valencia called the sheriff's office. This time, 2 deputies arrived. One of them, a tall woman with a badge that read Deputy Alvarez, took photos of the sticker and asked to see the documentation. We gave her the binder. She flipped through it carefully, occasionally nodding. "Have they ever tried to enforce actions on this property before?" she asked. "Never," I said. "This started the day my daughter moved in." Alvarez looked up. "So no history of enforcement, no prior notices?" "Not a single one." She closed the binder and turned to her partner. "This is attempted fraud." The male deputy raised his eyebrows. "You serious?" Alvarez pointed to the sticker. "This isn't a government-issued notice. It's designed to appear official, but it holds no legal weight. If they're trying to intimidate someone off their own land with fabricated authority, that's a criminal offense." They filed a report, photographed the mailbox, sticker, and even the exterior of the cabin. Before leaving, Alvarez said, "We'll be forwarding this to the county prosecutor. Don't remove anything yet. Let the evidence speak." The next morning, Valencia received a message from a neighbor named Tasha who lived 2 lots down the ridge. She wanted to talk. We invited her over. Tasha showed up with a folder of her own, nervous but determined. "I've kept quiet for years," she said, laying out photos and notes across our kitchen table. "But they've done this before, to my cousin and to the couple who lived in Lot 93 before them. Both moved out." She showed us a photo of a sticker identical to the one on our window. "They claimed my cousin's partner had no right to stay because their marriage wasn't recognized in the bylaws. She was forced to sell because the harassment didn't stop." Valencia's voice dropped. "They used fake enforcement notices," Tasha nodded, "and they threatened liens and sanctions." Same language. We copied everything she brought, then added it to the binder. 3 days later, Valencia received a certified letter from a local law firm. The HOA had filed a civil claim in small claims court, demanding reparations for unauthorized occupancy and damage to community standards. Valencia didn't flinch. Let them. She spent the next 2 days crafting a countersuit. She wasn't just defending her right to stay, she was suing the Lakewood Pines HOA for harassment, attempted fraud, and defamation. We filed our response, then submitted our own claim along with evidence photos, legal documentation, Tasha's testimony, and a copy of the sheriff's report. The clerk who accepted the file raised an eyebrow when she saw the volume of paperwork. "This is going to be interesting," she muttered. The hearing was scheduled for 2 weeks later. Word spread through the neighborhood like wildfire. People who hadn't spoken to us in years suddenly dropped by just to check in. Some of them asked to see the binder. Others admitted they'd been pressured before but never had the nerve to fight back. A week before the court date, we received another envelope, this time from the HOA's law firm. Inside was an offer. If we agreed to withdraw all claims and voluntarily disassociate from the Lakewood Pines community, they would drop their complaint and waive all fines. Valencia didn't even read the whole thing before tearing it in half. "They're scared," she said. "Let's make sure they stay that way." That night, I installed a second security camera facing the road, not out of fear but because when someone starts losing control they get desperate, and desperate people make mistakes. We were ready for that. The morning of the hearing arrived damp and foggy, the kind of gray that clung to your skin and made the world feel heavier than it should. Valencia stood in front of the mirror, adjusting the collar of her navy blazer. Her expression was unreadable, but her movements were precise, practiced like someone preparing for a cross-examination, not a small claims dispute. We drove into town in silence, passing the familiar bends of Lake Ridge Road until the courthouse came into view. A group of neighbors loitered near the entrance, some pretending to be on their phones, others openly watching us as we parked. One of them was Dennis from Lot 81, who gave us a nod he wouldn't have dared a month ago. Inside, the waiting room smelled like old paper and stale coffee. Valencia signed us in while I scanned the bulletin board. There it was. Lakewood Pines HOA v. Valencia Ruiz. Right below it, Ruiz v. Lakewood Pines HOA, et al. At exactly 9 o'clock, the bailiff called us in. The judge, a soft-spoken woman with steel gray hair and rectangular glasses, took her seat and began. Marlene sat beside her attorney, a slick-looking man in a pinstripe suit who clearly thought this was beneath him. Hank and Carla sat behind them, stiff-backed and silent. Valencia rose when her name was called. Her voice was steady, her posture unshaken. "I am the legal owner of the property in question. The plaintiff's claim of unauthorized residency is baseless, and I will demonstrate that not only am I within my rights, but that the HOA has engaged in a pattern of harassment and fraudulent enforcement." The judge motioned for her to proceed. Valencia began with the deed and the zoning maps. She moved through each document in order, laying out the survey records, the signed statements, and finally the notarized letter from the original developer. The judge asked 2 questions both technical and Valencia answered without hesitation. When it was the HOA's attorney's turn, he stood slowly, thumbing through a stack of loosely organized papers. "We maintain that Miss Ruiz violated occupancy terms established in the governing documents of Lakewood Pines. Her presence on the property constitutes a breach of Section 4B, which the judge held up a hand. Counsel, is the property outlined in your bylaws?" He blinked. "Not directly, Your Honor, but is the lot included in the boundary maps filed with the county?" "Well, no, but historically, then your claim is without jurisdiction," the judge said flatly. "Do you have any legal basis to enforce HOA regulations on a property outside your defined authority?" He hesitated. "We believed we did, based on precedent." Valencia stood. "May I respond?" The judge nodded. Valencia picked up a separate folder. This contains 3 examples of the HOA attempting to exert control over properties outside their boundary. In each case, they used similar tactics: fabricated notices, unregistered enforcement warnings, and threats of legal action. 2 of those residents were forced to sell. One left the state. She handed it to the clerk, who passed it to the judge. Marlene shifted in her seat, lips tightening. The judge glanced through the pages, her eyes narrowing slightly. "Miss Ruiz, is this the same language used on the notice placed on your window?" "Yes, Your Honor." "Identical phrasing. I also have the sheriff's report classifying the notice as a fraudulent attempt to exert legal authority. The case has been referred to the county prosecutor." There was a pause so complete you could hear the HVAC humming. The judge looked at the HOA's attorney. "Are you aware of any criminal investigation into your client?" He stiffened. "We were just made aware of the report last week. We haven't had time to review." "That's not good enough," the judge snapped. "If your client issued a falsified legal notice with intent to intimidate, that's a separate matter entirely." Marlene leaned forward. "This is being blown out of proportion. We were merely enforcing community standards. The board acted as it always has." The judge stared at her. That may be the most troubling thing I've heard all morning. She turned back to Valencia. Do you have a financial claim? Valencia opened a final folder. Yes, I'm seeking damages for defamation, emotional distress, and legal costs incurred in defending my property rights. I've also included documentation of decreased property value due to the public nature of the allegations. The judge took a moment, then closed the file. I'll have a decision by end of week. Until then, I'm issuing a temporary restraining order barring the HOA board from any direct contact with Ms. Ruiz or her property. Additionally, I'm forwarding this case to the district attorney for review under civil fraud statutes. Marlene's mouth opened, but no sound came out. Outside the courthouse, the fog had lifted. The crowd had thinned, but Tasha stood near our truck, arms crossed. That was something, she said. Valencia nodded. It's not over yet. That afternoon, we returned home to find something unexpected parked at the edge of the driveway, a black SUV with tinted windows and a county seal on the door. Two officials stood near the porch, one of them flipping through a binder. The man introduced himself as Investigator Kellerman from the county fraud office. He carried a badge and a quiet seriousness that didn't need a raised voice. We're following up on a report filed by the Sheriff's Department. There's probable cause to investigate Lakewood Pines Association for illegal enforcement practices and document falsification. Valencia invited them inside. They took photos of the sticker still affixed to the window, then asked to see all documentation we'd submitted to the court. They didn't say much while reviewing it, but Kellerman paused at the signed statements from former residents. Would these individuals be willing to speak to us directly? They're tired of being quiet, Valencia said. That evening, Kellerman met with Tasha and her cousin at a nearby diner. I wasn't there, but later that night, Tasha called to say they'd asked her to prepare a full written statement and warned her that subpoenas might be issued for HOA board communication records. By the next morning, the HOA website had gone offline. The community message board, a private forum moderated by Carla Mayers, was wiped clean. Someone had deleted every post going back 3 years. Too late. Valencia had already taken screenshots. Every post about her, every complaint, every official warning. She forwarded them to Kellerman's office and copied the DA. 3 days later, the decision from the judge came in. The HOA's claim was dismissed with prejudice. Valencia's countersuit was upheld. The court awarded her damages, attorney's fees, and issued an order requiring Lakewood Pines Association to formally acknowledge in writing that her property was not and had never been under HOA jurisdiction. We framed that letter, but the fallout didn't stop there. A month later, investigators raided the HOA's storage unit. Turns out, Marlene had kept more than just old meeting notes. They found blank violation stickers, rubber stamps, envelopes marked legal warning, and a spreadsheet tracking non-compliant residents. Some of the names were people we'd never met. Others were folks who'd vanished from the neighborhood over the years without explanation. The DA's office charged Marlene, Hank, and Carla with falsifying legal documents and conspiracy to commit fraud. The HOA was placed under temporary receivership. A third-party administrator was brought in to audit their finances and notify all residents of their legal rights. Marlene was arrested quietly at her home. No spectacle, no sirens, just 2 county deputies and a pair of handcuffs. The image of her being walked out in a beige robe and house slippers made its way to a neighbor's doorbell camera and eventually the local news. Valencia never celebrated. She just kept working on the cabin, replacing rotted boards, painting the shutters, building something permanent. One afternoon, a man in his 60s stopped by while she was planting wildflowers near the porch. He introduced himself as Douglas, one of the original builders who'd sold his lot years ago and moved to the other side of the lake. I used to think standing up to them was pointless, he said. You proved me wrong. Valencia wiped her hands and stood. They counted on everyone staying quiet. He looked around. Not anymore. Valencia was on the dock tossing pebbles into the lake when a gray sedan pulled up near the edge of the property. Two suits stepped out, neither looking like they were here for fishing. One carried a leather briefcase, the other a notepad. They identified themselves as investigators from the state attorney general's office, not county, state. I'm Investigator Corwin. This is Investigator Delaney. We're following up on a referral from the district attorney, the older one said, flipping open a badge wallet. We'd like to speak with Miss Ruiz. Valencia nodded. You can come inside. They didn't sit right away. Corwin scanned the living room like he was cataloging every detail not suspicious, just methodical. Delaney stood by the window, watching the road. We've been reviewing records from the Lakewood Pines Association. The scope of misconduct is broader than initially believed, Corwin said as Valencia handed him the documentation binder. The evidence you submitted helped establish a pattern, but what we've uncovered since is worse. Delaney turned. Have you ever heard of a company called Silver Horizon Management? Valencia frowned. No. They were listed as consultants for the HOA, Corwin explained. Turns out they're not a registered business, no tax ID, no state license. Yet the HOA paid them over $70,000 in the last 3 years for enforcement services. We believe this entity was created by members of the board to funnel association funds to themselves. Valencia leaned forward. So they were embezzling, among other things, Delaney said. We have reason to believe they used these funds to pay off residents they wanted out with hush money disguised as buyout incentives. In some cases, we suspect they forged signatures on quitclaim deeds to assume control of properties, then resold them through shell buyers. I felt my chest tighten. That's organized fraud, Corwin nodded grimly, and if we can prove it crossed state lines, it becomes federal. They asked permission to photograph the notice still stuck to the cabin window. Valencia hadn't removed it not because she was keeping it as a trophy, but because she knew it might still be relevant. Corwin peeled it off carefully with gloved hands and slipped it into an evidence sleeve. We'll need the original survey map and the notarized statement from the developer, Delaney added. We're moving toward indictments, and we want every loose end tied down. Valencia opened her laptop and pulled everything off her drive onto a flash drive for them. As she handed it over, she paused. If you're going after them, you need to look at Lot 93, she said. The previous owner left under pressure, and there's no sale record in the county registry. Just a sudden ownership transfer to someone on the board's extended family. Delaney jotted it down. We'll dig. They left with more than they came for. That evening, Valencia called Tasha and told her to be cautious, not afraid, just aware. If things were moving toward criminal charges, the people involved might try to cover their tracks. 3 days later, the Lakewood Pines community woke up to squad cars stationed at the clubhouse. A search warrant had been executed at dawn. Uniformed officers removed boxes of files, a desktop computer, and a locked safe. Word spread quickly that the safe contained handwritten logs notes from Marlene detailing resident compliance patterns and non-cooperative property owners. The fallout was immediate. Residents who had kept their heads down for years now spoke up. A man named Curtis, who owned a lot near the boat ramp, came forward with emails showing the board had threatened to revoke his access to shared amenities, unless he agreed to a voluntary property assessment fee that had never been approved by a vote. An older couple, the Linwoods, revealed that Carla had pressured them into selling their cabin under the pretense of community consolidation, only for the property to be flipped and sold 2 weeks later by someone with the same last name as Hank. The Attorney General's office held a press conference. Charges were announced. Wire fraud, forgery, racketeering, conspiracy to commit real estate theft. Marlene, Hank, and Carla were all named. Arrest warrants were issued for 2 more individuals, One of them had been posing as the head of Silver Horizon Management, while the other was a notary who had falsified signatures on multiple deeds. The community was stunned, but not shocked. Valencia was asked to testify before the grand jury. She agreed without hesitation. The DA's office offered to provide security escorts not because of any threat, but because they wanted to ensure no intimidation tactics resurfaced during the proceedings. At the courthouse, she sat in a room of wood paneling and fluorescent lights, waiting until her name was called. When she entered the chamber, the jurors looked tired but attentive. She spoke clearly, presenting the timeline of the harassment, the false notices, the fabricated claim of trespassing, and the retaliatory civil suit filed by the HOA. She ended with a single sentence. They gambled that no one would ever fight back. By the time she left the building, the first indictments had already been handed down. Marlene was arrested again, this time on federal charges. No house slippers this time. She was taken into custody at the office of her real estate firm in front of coworkers and clients. The trial took months to build, but when it came, the evidence was overwhelming. Valencia wasn't the only victim, just the most vocal. The prosecution laid out a web of deceit spanning nearly a decade. Fake companies, falsified records, backdoor deals, and a calculated effort to seize properties under the guise of enforcement. The jury returned guilty verdicts across the board. Marlene was sentenced to 8 years. Hank and Carla received 5 each. The notary got 3, and the fake consultant revealed to be Carla's nephew took a plea deal in exchange for testimony, receiving 2 years and probation. The Lakewood Pines Association was dissolved by court order. A special administrator was appointed to oversee its dismantling. All remaining funds were distributed back to residents based on a restitution formula. Valencia received a check, but she never cashed it. She donated it to a local group that offered legal aid to low-income homeowners facing similar harassment. Months passed. Spring arrived. The cabin took on new life. Valencia planted a vegetable garden near the tree line. The old dock, once weathered and cracked, had been replaced with a new one built by community volunteers, people who had once kept their distance, now showing up with tools and lumber and homemade sandwiches. Curtis brought over a solar panel rig for the roof. The Linwoods donated a weatherproof bench. Even Dennis, who once avoided eye contact, stopped by with a set of engraved wind chimes and hung them on the porch without a word. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the ridge, a county official knocked on the door. He carried a single sheet of paper with an embossed seal. "This is a certified copy of the final order," he said. "The HOA is officially dissolved. Your property is now and forever independent." Valencia thanked him and folded the paper carefully. No frame this time, just a quiet nod of closure. Later, as we sat on the dock watching the lake turn gold, she finally allowed herself to lean back and breathe. "They thought they could bury it all," she said. I looked at her, proud in a way I couldn't put into words. "They didn't count on you." She smiled, not triumphantly, just peacefully, as the wind stirred the trees and the chimes on the porch sang softly behind us.